of disengagement. You have disengaged teachers training disengaged students. I just want you all to think about this. I think we need a new contract with younger Americans. I think they deserve it. I think the country would be better off. I think we'd quit trying to figure out how, in small towns in rural America, how can we open up a new youth center so they don't use methamphetamine, when the truth is that means the parking lot becomes where they sell the methamphetamine because they're still bored. They're just bored at the youth center. And instead we say, all right, we want to engage you in life. What would it take to engage you in life? And we'll make it profitable for you to be engaged in life. Finally, I think it's very important to focus intensely on cultural change in the poorest and least healthy parts of America, including our prisons. And I want to be very clear about this. I'm just now starting a new book by Bill Cosby on moving from failure to triumph. I don't think, and I'm going to give you 3 quick examples. The poorest neighborhoods of our big cities, where the casualty rate is vastly worse than for Americans serving in Iraq. The Native American reservations that aren't connected to a casino, where the tragedy of fetal alcohol syndrome, alcoholism, and suicide is unbelievable. And our prisons, where we have total control over human beings who we then abandon to violence, gangs, and destruction. Changing those 3 requires a level of cultural change that we're not very good at. The closest model I love right now is Chuck Colson's effort at faith-based prisons, which is having a significant impact. The work being done by America Works, which was the pioneer on which we built welfare reform, and who are now engaged in helping prisoners get back into society. But nobody I know of has really tackled at the level of difficulty we're faced with. Centers of poverty, centers of isolation, and prison cultures that are antithetical to leading a decent life inside a productive society as a healthy citizen. And all 3 of those deserve serious, deep, hard work, and we need 2 or 3 states that decide they're going to tackle them and drive it all the way to the bottom and risk total political incorrectness and figure out what it takes. But there are millions of American lives at stake, and nobody anywhere in this country today, with the possible exception of Bloomberg in New York, nobody's really driving this as deep as it needs to be and as hard as it needs to be, because it's so difficult, and there are no constituencies. You know, nobody is going to be grateful tomorrow morning, because they're going to actually resent it initially, because it involves real change. It involves real threats to their culture. It involves a different way of doing things. Anyhow, Michael Kroll is our Director of Education Programs at American Solutions. Vince Haley is our Chief Researcher at the American Enterprise Institute. Jim Froeg is our head of our state program. We would love to work with you all. I think interest groups are probably going to fight, and bureaucracies are going to object, and the news media will trivialize this if they possibly can. But I hope if you get a chance to go to American Solutions and look at the research, I think you'll be startled at how deeply the American people are ready for this. And if you'd like to help us develop a series of projects, if you just have your staff contact Michael Kroll, or obviously any of the governors, you're going to call me. We really would like to develop a program next year. Next Tuesday in Iowa, I'm going to release what we're calling the Platform of the American People. We did a very simple thing. We took all of our data, 6 polls, about $428,000 worth of material, and we went through and we found every item on which there's an absolute majority of Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. English as an official language is a good example. Massive majority of all 3. And we said, what if you started your parties by adopting a baseline platform that was the same? I mean, if an absolute majority of Democrats are for English as the official language of government, why shouldn't that be in the Democratic Party platform? And why shouldn't it be in the Republican Party platform? Now, if it's in both parties' platforms, why shouldn't they be able to start January of 2009 by getting a couple things actually done before they decide to fight? And so we're going to release next Tuesday in 3 or 4 cities in Iowa, because the Iowa caucuses on January 3rd can actually adopt resolutions and platforms as well as pick individuals. And we're going to try to see if we can't, in both parties, find people who will take this to every single precinct and start the process. But you'll see us in your states on the same thing, and you'll find the data very interesting. There are some of these issues that are like 90% issues that in the elites are totally, you can't even discuss them. And yet in the country at large, you have a totally different country. in both parties and among independents. We call them tripartisan if they have independents. So that's a swift overview. I apologize, but I think 7 minutes over Nick's schedule. I apologize. You want to go to a discussion? Is that all right, Governor?
Question.
I like having this kind of conversation group because this is like that movie where it's doctor, doctor, doctor. I just have to go governor, then governor, then. So, who'd like to start? And let me say, by the way, if you look at this book, you'll see a large number of things that are actually already starting. So I want to say to the governors, I realize I'm actually here as a theoretician talking to practitioners who every day are getting up and actually doing this stuff for real. And I'd love to have the conversation in that context.
I have a question.
Governor?
When you speak of adolescents today, they're bored, and your practical solution to that, then what? To me, it's they need to work. And
right.
if for my kids, if they're not in a competitive sport, they're expected to have a job. But you had a paragraph up there about it, but what are your practical solutions in this contract with the youth?
No, well, look, I'd do two things. First of all, I'd start talking about measuring education outcomes, and I'd reward kids for learning faster. So if you had a 9th grader doing calculus, that'd be good. It totally blows apart the Carnegie system, totally blows apart the state curriculum, totally blows apart the current model. I once sponsored a program called Earning by Learning where I took my speech money in Congress and we paid $2 per book to children in public housing who'd read in the summer. The first year we did it in Villa Rica, Georgia, we had a young girl who read 83 books, 9 years old, paid her $166 in cash. In September she went to school. Now, she had spent the entire summer reading every day. She was excited. She clearly was a rate breaker. She wanted attention. She was already a year ahead of the rest of her class. She got sent to the principal's office by the 3rd day because she was bored to death. So I'd start and I'd say, rethink, put up the following question. Is the purpose of paying for children being in schools for them to learn or for them to be controlled? If the purpose is to learn, what if we measured learning and actually had reward systems for maximum level learning? My daughter, Jackie Cushman, is putting together a project in Atlanta. We're working with the Atlanta School Board and with a couple of foundations. We'd love to have some more help on this, by the way. To actually take, the school board's agreed to take the poorest neighborhood in the city, and we're going to try to raise enough money to go in and pay the students the equivalent of working at McDonald's if they'll take math and science and get a B or better. And I'd actually pay them every Friday if I can get this worked out right. Because I think the minute the poorest kids in the poorest neighborhood walk around and they go buy ice cream and their friends say, where'd you get money? They say, well, I learn, you know. You just started changing the whole underlying culture. But you're right. The great American culture that made us the most dynamic country in the world is a culture that is real. You get up in the morning and you go work. You have an adventure. You have a vision. You do something for real. It is not a culture trapped by bureaucrats into moving at the pace of the slowest bureaucrat. And so I'd start with rethinking how you reward learning. I'd start with rethinking the age of work. I talked to the Vertebrate Paleontology Society actually in Austin a couple weeks ago, one of the most fun things I've done this year. And I said, I would love to see spending the summer working as an intern for a vertebrate paleontologist on a dig count as credit academically. If somebody goes down to Zoo Atlanta and decides they want to work and they're prepared to work with the veterinarian all year, could they get 10 hours credit as an intern in the 7th grade? But break up this whole monopolized, bureaucratic, curriculum-based system of process and reward achievement. And then let them earn money. Now, if you want to be really radical, you could follow on a version of Sarkozy, who is trying to get the French to break out of a 35-hour work week by having no taxes on overtime. And you could say, look, I want to encourage this so much, there'll be no taxes for people who are under 16. And then move a bill in Congress that says FICA doesn't start till you're 16. So you actually could take home all the money you earned as a kid. Which also means if you're really poor, you're starting a kid on learning how to start a business at 9 or 10 or 11. A friend of many of you, Sheldon Adelson, started his first business at 16. John Williams, who you know, started his first business at like 20, or in college, and actually was started his first business as a 12-year-old running a newspaper route, hiring 4 friends to deliver newspapers because he could get more newspapers. these are guys who are now millionaires. So what do we say to a poor child in a poor neighborhood today? No, you can't work. No, you can't accumulate wealth. No, you can't have